Father Stephen, on this show, we love to talk to priests about where their vocations come from. And when was the first time you actually started thinking that you might become a priest?
The thought occurred to me pretty early on in my life. I remember being 7 or 8 years old, and my grandfather, on my father's side, loved going to church. He was a really devout Catholic. And so he always was saying he was going to buy me a Mass kit, and he wanted to get a missal for me to practice saying Mass at home even when I was little. So we took home a missal up from the church. I would set up like a piece of pita bread on the table and have a glass with apple juice and take the missalette and pretend like I was saying the Mass in my own house. So from pretty early on, the idea had come into my mind of giving my life to God as a priest.
And you went to Catholic schools. Did that help to keep that thought alive?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You went to Our Lady of Snows.
I was in Our Lady of the Snows from nursery school until 5th grade.
And then was it in 5th grade where your parents decided you were going to be homeschooled?
Yeah, it was at the end of 5th grade.
That's an interesting concept. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my mother had learned a little bit about it, and for her, the idea was very attractive, that she thought somehow that the education would be a little bit better being schooled at home. And not that there was anything wrong with Our Lady of the Snows.
Right.
But we started to be homeschooled, and at that time we also got connected with another group out in Rockville Center, a group of homeschooling families who would meet together to do their religious education. So math, history, subjects like that were at home, and then we do our religious education as a group over in one of our family's houses. Since I was in 7th grade, I sang in the parish choir and the children's choir. And the music director there, Lisa Kelly, she was the organist who played my first Mass. I sang in that choir until I was in 8th grade, and it was something that I really loved doing, being involved in the parish, being able to sing, and working with a very, very talented musician. And as soon as I was able to, I joined the altar servers, because they had just started to allow the girls in the parish, so no more altar boys, altar servers. And my class was the first class that allowed the girls to serve as well. And I served there, and so my earliest memories of the parish were ways that the parish allowed me to be involved in the life, in the liturgy, at the Mass.
Yeah. Who were some of the priests that you grew up with in the parish?
The pastor for my early years was Father Tugwood, and after him, Monsignor Geppetto, later Bishop Geppetto, was my pastor up until the year before I was ordained.
Now, when you decided to go to high school then, and you had this idea of priesthood, then you chose to go to what was the minor seminary, Cathedral Prep. Was that a tough transition to go from homeschooling to a more formal educational setting again?
Well, it wasn't as tough as you might think. Because on the one hand, because I was in Snows for so many years, I still maintained a lot of my friendships with the people there. In fact, having no brothers growing up, there were a few friends from school that really were and still are my brothers, people that I remain very close to, and that I see several times throughout the year. And so Cathedral Prep wasn't as much of a transition because I still had relationships with people in my class. And also Cathedral Prep was a very small school. My class entering was about 40.
Wow.
And in the end, we were 35 that graduated. So almost right away, you got to know everybody in your class, and within a very short amount of time, the rest of the school.
How many priests out of that 40 entering class? How many guys were ordained?
For my class, we have 3 priests.
Okay.
So myself, Father Sean Sukiel, and Father Paul Kim.
Okay. So that's pretty close to the 10%, which basically they say is the average, for going into the freshman year of a high school minor seminary. Usually about 10% get ordained, so that's pretty close to it. Who were some of the priests who were on faculty at Cathedral Prep that really made a difference in your life?
When I was there were 3 priests on faculty. Monsignor Joe Calise was the principal, Father Fred Morano was a teacher and the choir director there, and Father Thomas Ahern was a religion teacher as well.
And how were they involved in the life of the school? What was it about them that impressed you? Did they teach you? Were they all teachers?
Yes, they all taught different courses. So Monsignor Calise was morality, Father Fred was introduction to religion, and Father Tom was Old Testament.
But that Father Fred, I bet, was a tough teacher, huh?
Father Fred was a little bit tough in the beginning, but he really eased up pretty quickly with his freshman class. And so we knew our stuff. He was no joke. He wasn't no joke either as the choir director. but truth be told, he was probably the most important influence on my vocation.
Uh-huh.
Not just at that time, but even afterwards.
Hmm. Well, you know, Father Fred is really a great guy, a nice guy, and sometimes they have to put up that tough facade, you know, to keep people in line there.
Well, especially in an all-boys school.
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned choir. I mean, music seems to be a part of your life growing up. You actually play a little piano and organ, right? Tell us where did that begin?
Actually, Lisa Kelly was really my inspiration. Watching her play the organ when I was singing in the children's choir, I wanted to, actually I should take that back. My uncle was the first reason, because my uncle Jim played the piano. He had a piano in his house, and I used to love tinkering around with it, you know? Taught me how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, all the classics.
Uh-huh.
And so I always wanted to learn how to play, and seeing Lisa play, and she gave out an award once in the choir. It was like, I guess it was trying to promote like good behavior in the choir, you know, people who weren't making too much noise.
Uh-huh.
So she gave me this little toy piano, and it was the first piano that I had.
Uh-huh.
So when my parents saw me tinkering on that, I think that's where they got the idea to suggest piano lessons. So when I was 7 years old, I started taking lessons over in Floral Park.
Uh-huh. And it's something you continue to do today, and you played the organ while you were in the seminary system, right?
Yeah, in the seminary, I came across the first organ that I tried to play, and it didn't go so well. You know, it's not the same instrument. So as soon as I was able to, I started to take organ lessons for a few years. I made a deal with one of my professors at St. John's. I took formal lessons at Catholic University during my studies there.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the guys I think was in Cathedral around your time is a pretty good organist himself, Father Danny Champoli, right? How would you compare Father Champoli's playing the organ to the way you play the organ?
Oh, Father Danny is years beyond me. I mean, we have different skills too. We were sitting down just this past year, and I was playing something that was a little more modern. He was playing something that was a little bit more classical.
Uh-huh.
And but I would say that he's a far better musician than I am. In fact, I was a great admirer of him when I was in the high school because his playing was so flawless that as I was going through, it really inspired me to sit down and put in the time so that I could try to play, maybe not as well as him, but at least somewhere close by.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we came here, we were in the auditorium of what used to be Bishop Ford High School. Unfortunately, it's closed now. And the reason we're doing the interview here is because we have a piano here. So we want to bring you over to the piano. We're going to ask you to play a little ditty on there so that you could show off some of your skills. Okay? What do you think? All right?
Sounds good.
Let's do that.
Browsing around the chopsticks.
All right, let's do it. Father Stephen, what are you going to play?
I'm going to play the second movement of Beethoven's 8th Piano Sonata.
Okay, and why did you choose that?
Because I switched over to organ when I was in the seminary, and I had met a friend there who introduced this piece to me. It's a piece I had heard a few times before, and it was something that really helped me get back into piano playing when I was in the seminary, and something that I still practice. So the piece has meaning to me because it represents my friendship with the person who introduced it to me, and also it's beautiful.
All right.
It's all right.
Let's hear. Beautiful. Or should I say bravo?
Thank you.
Come up here. I want to talk to you a little bit more about, you said before to me that your piano playing is a little bit like your road to your vocation. Tell me what you meant by that.
What I meant was that I stopped taking lessons after I was in 8th grade. Using the excuse that I was going to be too busy in high school, but really I just didn't feel like taking lessons after that point. And the same was true of my vocation. I knew pretty early on that this desire was there in my heart to become a priest, but it wavered, tapered at times. Other desires came up, the desire to be married, to do something else with my life, maybe go into the field of mathematics or computer science or something a little more scientific. But when I got to high school, the music director, Father Fred Morano, pulled me in, got me to help out in the school, and got me practicing again so that I could play for their masses. And the same way, he also reawoken in me the vocation to the priesthood. By retreats, by his example, and especially by the energy he brought to the school, by how much you could just tell he loves being a priest.
Sure. What do your friends say to you, when you were growing up and you were saying to them, I'm thinking about becoming a priest? Did you find them generally supportive, or did they question, say, why did you want to do that for?
I was very afraid of what their reaction would be. But it was very interesting that the people that I was the most afraid would react negatively to finding out that I wanted to be a priest, the ones that would make fun of me, were the ones who were the most supportive. The ones who said, that's really great. We really hope that you'll be a priest. And these are the people now who I'm doing the weddings of and baptizing their children and very much a part of their life through the church.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the seminary itself. You go away, basically, it's a 4 or 5 year period of discernment, and you're studying and you're thinking about it, and you pretty much got your mind made up, but there's got to be always questions, right? That must come up and you say, gee, this is really what I want to do. What were those years like for you?
There were some years that were very difficult, especially the very first few years in the seminary when I was transitioning. I guess in terms of the question of the seminary and your vocation, the fact of the matter is that while you're still in school, you maintain your relationships with the people that you know. And so the people that I was attracted to before I entered, I still talk to, and I was still attracted to them in the seminary. And there is a very real struggle because you see a real good there. The good of marriage, the good of dating, the good of having somebody to support you throughout your life.
Sure. You got to really make, it's a commitment that you have to make. At some point, you have to say, okay, this is going to be it, And you studied for a couple of years over in Rome. What was that like to get a picture of the Universal Church?
Oh, it was incredible. The seminary where we studied is right on top of the hill that overlooks the Vatican, so it's really breathtaking to be really right in the center of it all. And for me, it was an additional special meaning because my family comes from Italy. And although culturally we were Italian, like for example, the language sort of fell out of use. My great-grandparents didn't teach all of my grandparents to speak Italian because they wanted them to be American.
So you didn't speak Italian when you went over there?
Growing up, not a word.
Really?
A few words, not always the best
not
ones.
Not the word.
And food words, and you count to 10, but that was about it. So going back gave me the opportunity to really come to understand my language, my culture, and my church.
Sure. Then you were there for 2 years studying, and then you came back here for a pastoral year. What was that like? You came and worked in a parish, right? Tell us a little bit about what parish you were in and what are some of the things that you did.
Well, the pastoral year was great, and it was a really wonderful experience because whereas in the seminary, it's a lot more theoretical. Some of the things that you learn, there's some practical things too. Learning about preaching and about how to say the Mass, offer the sacraments. Different things that come up in meetings with the people in the parish.
What were some of the activities? What were the activities that you were involved in while you were at St. Andrews?
When I was there, I was involved with the altar servers, so training them, putting together the schedule, practicing with them when big masses were coming up. I taught in the school once a week because they had 2 sections of 8th grade. And it was a real challenge for me at first because I never taught before, and usually you have a textbook or something to follow along. But Father Holcomb said to me, just go in the classroom and share your faith with them. And it was terrifying because I didn't know what to share with them. I knew my faith, but I didn't know how I was going to be able to connect it to these young men and women in the parish. But it ended up being one of the best experiences that I ever had teaching.
And then you went back and you finished your studies here in the United States, right?
Yes.
Where did you study after that?
After my pastoral year, I joined my classmates out in Huntington for a year. And then when they consolidated the seminaries out in Dunwoody, I traveled with my classmate as some of the first people to study in that combined seminary.
So you were pioneers. Really.
First ones across the bridge.
First ones across, and you were the first class ordained then, from there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about, people always talk about their wedding days, and talk about your ordination day, because that's a big day in your life when you're making this commitment, and now, okay, you got to start the work now. You got to start to minister now. What do you remember about ordination day itself?
Well, ordination day, like wedding days, a lot. It's a whirlwind in a lot of ways. But there are some memories that stand out very clearly from the ordination. First of all, being very nervous beforehand. I remember looking up as we were walking in, and I saw a friend from high school that I hadn't seen in quite a few years. And immediately tears sprang to my eyes to see the amount of support that somebody that I had been in touch with really in such a long time had found out about the ordination.
Sure.
And made the effort to come out to be there.
Yeah. And what was the ceremony like itself? Was it an emotional time for you, getting through it? Sometimes you see guys get very emotional during that ceremony. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of emotions, and not just the fear that I talked about beforehand, but it's very humbling to be sitting there before the bishop during the instruction, to know that unfortunately it's not often these days that you see a full church. That's not true of the ordination. The church is packed. And so to see everybody in Brooklyn come out for an event like that really is very humbling and very beautiful.
Sure.
And it might sound strange to say this, but there are moments of very profound peace during the ordination.
At what point does that settle in? At what point during the ceremony did you feel, okay, let's go with this?
Personally, it was when we prostrated ourselves in the sanctuary as the rest of the church sang the litany of the saints. And it was that moment for myself that I stopped shaking.
What was it about that moment?
And it wasn't the trains going underneath us during the ceremony.
Yeah.
But it was listening to and hearing the voices of everyone in the church praying. The cantor would intone the saint's name, but then you would hear everybody respond, pray for us. And there was something about the relationship that expressed.
Yeah.
That, sure, the church was ordaining me a priest that day, but there was also a church full of people who were praying for me. They were supporting me, and really that want me to be a good priest once I left that church and began my life in the parish.
Sure.
And although there are many more beautiful moments in the ordination, and certainly more important moments sacramentally, personally, there was something that just really stood out during the Litany of the Saints.
Sure. So let's talk now about the culture shock after you get ordained, and now you get assigned to St. Bernadette's Parish in Tyka Heights, which is a wonderful parish, very lively parish, but you're used to celebrating, like you say, with the other guys in the seminary, and the liturgies are great, people are really involved, and sometimes it's a bit of a shock when you come out, and liturgies are not the same in the parishes. It's a challenge for you.
Right.
What was that experience like to come out and experience the church in a different way?
Well, at St. Bernadette's, I'm very lucky to have a pastor there who takes great care with the liturgy.
Monsignor Caserta.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
So Monsignor Caserta, he loves to have good music. He makes sure that the church is always decorated very beautifully for the events we have, Easter and Christmas. And so, is it different? Absolutely. It's even different from the liturgies that he would help out with when I was with him at the seminary in Douglaston. There we would have these floral arrangements that took over most of the altar. We have beautiful arrangements at the parish, but they are a little bit different.
Sure.
But there is a certain sense that although the liturgies in the seminary and the parish are different, essentially they are the same. And thinking back to what happened in the seminary, you can really see that at those moments, even though we were separated from our families and from our friends during Easter, some would come to visit us, but usually it was just us in the seminary celebrating these liturgies.
Sure.
Now I can see that we weren't alone. That when we prayed those liturgies, we prayed them in union with all the parishes across the world.
Sure. Now, St. Bernadette's, you've only been there a year and a half, but Talk to us a little bit about what your ministry has been like, what some of the things, maybe some eye-openers, or some of the activities that you really enjoy in the parish. What do you like best about being in St. Bernadette?
Is being able to work with the families in the parish,
Mm-hmm.
to work with the parents who volunteer a lot of their time with events at the school, but also in terms of preparing the church for some of the liturgies, volunteering for events, giving so much of their time to help us.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, I enjoy working with their children over in the school.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about, one of the things that we emphasize in the church today is evangelization, this emphasis on new evangelization, trying to reach young people. I mean, it seems to be a tough thing these days. Now, I think you mentioned you were over at that youth experience over at Most Precious Blood a couple of weeks ago. How do you reach out to young people today? How do you talk to them? How do you make the church attractive to young people?
Well, I have to say, spending the time teaching the 8th grade has been really a big help in that area, because to evangelize people, you have to understand where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to spend time with the young men and women of the parish has given me a sense really of what's going on in the parish,
Mm-hmm.
what their lives are like,
Mm-hmm.
what their concerns are. They're very open about sharing aspects of their lives in the midst of teaching this class.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, priests have made a good impression upon you, and they were, in a sense, your heroes and gave you role models for you. What do you say to young people today who might be thinking of the priesthood, or young women who may be thinking about religious life? It's not the easiest sell these days.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to them? How would you encourage somebody thinking about priesthood?
Give yourself a reminder. I was very lucky and very blessed by God that at those moments when that desire that God put in my heart faltered, He put people in my path that helped reawaken that desire. Father Fred Morano. And every time that I struggled in the seminary with different doubts or concerns, God would always put a person in my path that would pull me back, that would remind me of why it is that I want to be a priest, to serve God, to serve His people,
Mm-hmm.
that this is really something that's very important and that I care about.
Mm-hmm.
And so have some type of reminder, so that if God put that desire in your heart, you won't forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it'll always be there in the back of your mind. And to see it with your own eyes, to have some type of a physical reminder that this is something that you think about,
Mm-hmm.
can really help to guide your decisions, your desires, and help to give you a focus. Because if this is something that God desires for you,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that'll bring you joy.
Sure.
It'll make you happy.
Well said. Well, it's good to see a happy priest, and I think that's the best vocation recruiter you can ask for, is a happy priest. Father Stephen, thanks so much for being with us today. And thank you for watching. You've been watching On the Block, and I'm Ed Wilkinson with Father Stephen Giuletti.
God bless.